Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to another edition of the Sunday School Review. This week's Sunday School lesson is entitled Freedom, Love, and Faith. It's taken from Galatians, the 5th chapter, verses 1 through 15. And in this lesson, Paul is writing to the church at Galatia, that is the Galatians. And after some time, when Paul had left Galatia, there were false teachers that had persuaded them to consider a different gospel or a perverted gospel. Paul considered that gospel really not to be a gospel at all, but it was a perversion of the gospel of Christ that Paul had taught the Galatians. And in the 5th and 6th chapter of Galatians, Paul addresses an issue here. And that issue is a matter of circumcision. Now, in the idea, the false teachers that was teaching this perverted gospel, they were called Judaizers. And they were preaching legalism, not the grace of Christ. Now, legalism was based on the fact they was teaching that the Old Testament law was still binding and necessary for salvation. And that's obviously not what Paul taught. Paul taught that the cross marked the end of the law of Moses, okay? And all that was needed for salvation or to be justified or made righteous was faith in Jesus Christ alone, okay? That's what Paul taught them. There are several outlines. The first one is fight for freedom or fight for liberty, okay? And that is verse 1 through, let's see, 6. Let's just take 1 through 6. That would be our first outline. Okay. Let's read the first verse here. And the subtitle under that is Accomplished by Christ. Okay, let's read that. Stand fast, therefore, in the liberty wherewith Christ has made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Okay, let's stop right there. Okay, Paul want to make sure that the Galatians understand and that they stand fast in the liberty or in the freedom whereas Christ has made them free, and not be entangled again with the bondage, with the yoke of bondage. In other words, Christ is the one that has made them free or made us free from the bondage of sin or slavery, okay? So Christ is who have set us free, okay? So that's what Paul insists that the Galatians continue to do. They continue to stand fast in the liberty of freedom whereby Christ has made you free, has set you free from the bondage of sin. In other words, the cross set them free from the law or the bondage of sin. Okay, let's read verse 2. Behold, I, Paul, say unto you, that if ye be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. Let's go to 3. For I testify again to every man that is circumcised, that he is a debtor to do the whole law. Verse 4. Christ is become of no effect unto you, whosoever you are, justified by the law. Ye are fallen from grace. Okay, let's go back to 2 here. Paul is saying basically that circumcision is not a requirement for salvation. Or he said, circumcision has no value as it relates to salvation. It's not necessary for salvation. Circumcision is not necessary for salvation. It has no value as it relates to salvation. Said, but if ye be circumcised, Christ shall profit you nothing. It's not a requirement to become children of Abraham or children of God that you be circumcised. That's not a requirement, okay? Let's do 3. For I testify again to every man that is circumcised, that he is a debtor to do the whole law. In verse 3, Paul is saying that if you be circumcised, if you go under the idea of being circumcised, you become obligated to do the entire law. It's not a cafeteria type thing where you pick and choose. Well, we're going to add some elements of the law in with grace. You can't mix it. It's either law or grace. There's no such gospel as law grace. No, it's either law or grace. And Paul is also saying, if you follow the law, you're asking God to judge you based on your works. If you follow the law, you're saying, well, God, judge me based on my works. And we said last week that you can't earn salvation based on works of the law. No. So if you go under the law, you're saying, God, judge me based on my works of the law and not by Christ. The cross of Christ was the end of the law. So Paul said, if you any man that is circumcised is a debtor to the whole law. You're obligated to keep the entire law. And you can't add any part of the law of Moses as being necessary for salvation. Okay, it's either law or grace. And verse 4, Christ is become of no effect to you, whosoever you are, justified by the law. ye are fallen from grace. So if you opt to follow the law, you have abandoned grace. You can't embrace grace and at the same time embrace the law. If once you revert back to following the elements of the law, of operating under the law, you have abandoned grace. You have rejected Christ, the cross, the work that he did on the cross. In essence, what you're saying, well, what he did on the cross is of no value. I'm going to rely on the law. Okay, so if you're trying to be justified by the law, you have fallen from grace. You have abandoned grace. Okay, let's read verse 5 here. For we through the Spirit waited for the hope of righteousness by faith. Let's read it again. It said, we through the Spirit wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. It didn't say wait for the hope of righteousness by the law. It says by faith. Okay, if you rely on the law to make you righteous, you're going to be waiting a long time. Okay, as I said last week, there was a purpose for the law, but the law was not given to bring righteousness. Salvation was never intended to come by the law. The law was to lead us to Christ. That was the purpose, not to bring salvation. So if you're waiting on righteousness by the law, you're going to be waiting a long time. Matter of fact, you're still waiting. Righteousness is by faith, not by works of the law. Okay, and that's what it says in verse 5. Wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. Okay, let's go to verse 6. For in Jesus Christ, neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but faith which worketh by love. Okay, whether the circumcised, or as the Jews place a lot of emphasis on circumcision, okay, they held that as a status symbol. So whether you are circumcised or not, there is no status symbol for those in Christ Jesus. That's what it says here. For in Christ Jesus. Now, if you're talking about being a biological heir or descendant of Abraham, well, yeah, we circumcised, we Abraham seed biologically. But if you in Christ, that gives you no special status because you are circumcised. It says, for in Christ, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision availeth anything or has no special status. Okay, as we said last week, and I think it was in the lesson, there's neither Jew nor Greek. We are all one in Christ Jesus. Male, female, bond, free, Jew or Greek, we're all one in Christ Jesus. No one has a special standing, for we are one in Christ Jesus. And that's what Paul taught, but that was that message that Paul had taught had been perverted. The false teachers, the Judaizers, were teaching that you had to add elements of the law was necessary for salvation, and that was an error that was wrong. Okay. Let's go to our next outline is obstacles to freedom. Verse 7. Ye did run well. Who did hinder you that ye should not obey the truth? Okay, verse 8. This persecution cometh not of him that calleth you. This persuasion cometh not of him that calleth you. Verse 9. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. Okay, let's talk about these a few verses here. Verse 7. Ye did run well, but who hindered you? In other words, who caused you to stumble, or who caused you to break stride? You was doing well. This is what Paul is telling the Galatians here. You were doing well, but who caused you to stumble or break stride? Okay. Now, in verse 8, this persuasion. In other words, this persuasion cometh not of him that calleth you. In other words, who persuaded you? Who told you these things? And he's saying, whoever told you this, it was not from God. Basically, what he's saying, yeah, somebody have misled you, but it clearly wasn't him that calleth you. It wasn't God that misled you. It was someone else that have misled you. And verse 9 is a little leaven leavens the whole lump. Now, in Israel's history, leaven represents evil, and a little leaven is what Paul is saying, a small deviation from the truth. A small deviation from the truth can lead to much devastation. It's just like if someone come to you with a falsehood, it's not going to be so blatant. There may be a little bit of truth mixed in with it, but overall it's still false. I mean, if it's so blatant, you're not going to believe, no, that's crazy. I'm not going to believe that. But they mix in a little truth with the lie. So Paul is saying, I'm going to root out this evil before it destroys the whole. Okay, that's what he's saying. I'm going to root it out. I'm not going to say, well, okay. So they just saying that, yeah, you need to be circumcised. That's not so bad. That's a little bit off. I'll let that slide. No, Paul said, I'm not going to let that slide. This small error can lead to much devastation. A little leaven can lead to can leaven the whole lump. That's what he's actually saying. I'm going to expeditiously root out this error. I'm not going to let that error slide. Okay, so that's not good to let this error slide, because it can lead to contamination of the whole. Okay, let's go to verse 10. Verse 10. I have confidence in you through the Lord that ye will be none otherwise minded, but he that troubles you shall bear his judgment, whosoever he be. In other words, Paul is saying the individual or individuals that is teaching this erroneous doctrine, okay, God is going to judge them, okay? God is going to judge those individuals, whosoever they may be, okay? God will judge those individuals. Let's go to verse 11 and 12, and the subsection is persecution. And I, brethren, if I yet preach circumcision, why do I yet suffer persecution? Then is the defense of the cross ceased? Verse 12. I would they even were cut off which trouble you. You know, with these false teachers, okay, I wish that they were you know, gotten rid of, okay. The people that mislead you, these false teachers, I would that they were cut off which trouble you or teach error. Okay, verse 11, which we read. Okay, in other words, here it mentions the fact that these people that are teaching this, these are Jews, and the Judaizers are persecuting Paul. Paul is saying, if I was teaching basically what they were teaching, if I yet preach circumcision, no, if I was teaching what they teaching that, yeah, you got to be circumcised in order to is necessary for salvation, and keeping certain aspects of the law is necessary. If I was teaching that, they wouldn't be persecuting me, because I would be teaching the same thing they're teaching. But they persecuting me because I'm teaching the truth. That's why I'm being persecuted by the Jews and by these Judaizers, okay? I'm teaching the truth, and that is the reason that I'm being persecuted. Not the fact that I'm not with them. I'm not in cahoots with them teaching this what they call legalism. That's what the Judaizers call legalism. In other words, you got to, the Old Testament is still binding. That's what they would teach. They were teaching legalism, that the Old Testament is still binding. Paul was teaching the Old Testament is non-binding. And they're teaching the Old Testament is binding. And I'm teaching truth. The truth is that in the last clause of 11, then is the offense of the cross ceased. You know, the cross, Christ ended the law. The cross was the end of the law. That's the truth, and that's what Paul was teaching, but that's not what these Judaizers were teaching. They were teaching legalism, that the law was still binding, okay? And that's why they was at odds with Paul, okay? Because they was teaching a false message, a different message, albeit false. They were teaching a false message and a different message, which was different from Paul, and that's why they were at odds or persecuting Paul. Okay. Now the next outline, the last outline, the paradox of freedom, and it starts at verse 13. For brethren, ye have been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. Let's go ahead and read the last two verses here, 14 and 15. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. 15. But if ye bite and devour one another, take heed that ye not be consumed one of the other. Okay, now when we're talking about, and as in verse 13, you have been called unto liberty or freedom. We are free from the yoke of the law. The freedom that we have, we are free from the yoke or the bondage of the law. And said, only use not this liberty as an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. This love that Paul is referring to is the love that is produced by God. In other words, one of the elements of the fruit of the Spirit. This is that type of love. The fruit of the Spirit, one of the elements of the fruit of the Spirit. Okay, that love, that's the type of love that Paul is talking about. And verse 14 said, for all the law, the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one commandment. The entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one commandment. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Okay, now in 15, Paul is issuing a warning. Okay, he's issuing a warning that that you love one another. That if you bite and devour one another, you will be consumed. In other words, he said, you don't want to, don't listen to false teaching. And this is, as a matter of fact, that is the very way that Adam and Eve lost their freedom, because they listened to Satan. They listened to Satan. So you need to have love is the thing that is going to bind you together and cause you to respect one another. Is that love, and that is the type of love that is produced by God. The what we refer to as the agape love, and we should have that type of love and respect for our brethren. And that's our lesson for today. We'd like to thank you for watching. We ask you to join us next week for another edition of the Sunday School Review. Thank you.